I'm getting back to the tank hull proper itself. I'm going to use this Screaming Skull to do a little bit of dry brushing on the hull. Now this is going to be an all-over dry brush. I'm going to work most of my paint off camera on because I want this to be, well, I want it to be all over. I don't want it to be a heavy dry brush. But what this is going to do is just bring out all the edges. I'm going to do it even across the green, because even on the green, it's not going to be, covering up a lot of the color. It's just going to really be hitting those rivets into edges and things like that. That's what I want to stand out. That's the look I like when building these Warhammer kits. I'm not putting much pressure at all. I'm letting the brushes hit everything fairly substantially. I'm digging down into it, but I'm not putting any pressure. I'm just close in, if that makes sense, so that I get that look. One time a friend of mine told me, he said, hey, I like the Warhammer kits you do and all that, but man, they've got an exaggerated look. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly why I like them. I find that a lot of fun. So that's the appeal to me. All those rivets. I mean, who doesn't like rivets? I love rivets because you can do so many things with them. Rust them and stain them and put all sorts of stuff around them. So yeah, but I'm going to get this done all over the parts that are painted with the green and the brown, and see where I go from there. All right, the changes, it's fairly subtle, but you can see it brings out all the edges and the bolts and the details, and it leaves a little bit of scruffiness on the green, but I like that. I think it just begins the weathering, just kind of brings the whole surface together like that. Now there's various, what do you call them? Skulls across the model. Warhammer loves their skulls. So I'm going to paint these in the appropriately named Screaming Skull. And there's also these little banners that are along here, and I'm going to paint that also. I may try to freehand in some kind of saying. Typically you see something that's either the name of one of the planets or star systems or whatever in the Warhammer universe, or some kind of Latin-esque word. I don't know that it's always Latin proper, but Latin-esque. I'm considering maybe having a little fun with it and put in something that's universe appropriate-ish, but not actually from the universe. We shall see if I can think of something clever. If not, I'll just look up something online and mimic that. I'm going to cover this in Agrax Earthshade. It's one of the Citadel shades. One thing to note is when I was putting on the Agrax Earthshade, I stippled some of it on here just to give it a little bit of a textured appearance. Now I'm going to go back with my Screaming Skull, and on these upper parts, I'm going to just go ahead and paint those back over to neaten it up with the Screaming Skull. And then just on these two little, whatever these things are on either side of the scary skull head. And then on the skull itself, I'm just going to stipple on some of that Screaming Skull a little bit at a time to just build up some highlights right along the top of the skull. And then off camera, I'm going to get in close and paint right around the eyes and the nose to bring those out. And then here on the banner, I'm going to brighten up the upper edge, the upturned surfaces like that. And then in the middle of it, I'm going to go back to my stippling like that, so that it ends up with a little bit of a textured look. Whoops, got too much on there. Oh well, I'll live with it. That's the way I'm going to do these sides. And that's how that looks. Next thing to do is try and paint a word on there. Now, I'm going to have to do the painting off camera. I just don't know of any way I can get this on camera with any accuracy. But what I do when I have to paint letters is I look at the space that I have available, and then I make lines dividing it up either in half or thirds or quarters, depending on the length of it. And then I just plan the spacing of the letters. In this case, there's 9 spaces needed, 8 letters and 1 space between 2 words. So that I do the count, and that halfway space is the first letter of the second word. So then I just go in with a pencil like this, and I just roughly draw in where the words are, and then I use, this is a 2-0 liner brush. It's from Blick Art. It's a synthetic Blick Masterstroke. Very good brush brand. But any liner brush works well for this. And the reason I like a liner brush instead of a really tiny pointy brush, this has the really tiny point that helps, but the belly of it is long enough that it will hold some paint in there. And if you get the paint consistency right and touch it off on a piece of paper towel so that it's not flowing off too fast, it works almost like a pen. Now, for the paint, what I'm going to be using is Vallejo Black, just straight Vallejo Black. 1 drop of that, 1 drop of Liquitex Flow Improver, or Flow Aid, I think is what they call it, and 1 drop of water. And I just got it in my palette, and I mix it up, and I get some on my brush, and I just touch it to a piece of paper towel, and then you can see when I put it on my finger, it comes off like that. Now I have to make a few passes to get it on there, but I should be able to do this. But like I said, I wish I could do it on camera. But I've tried stuff like this before, and I just have to get it literally right up to my face and hold the brush right in close and rest my hand against it to keep it from shaking. Because if I don't, that's my hand, what it's doing right now. So I've got to get right in on it. But hopefully this will work. All right, that won't win any Golden Demon. Won't even win a bronze tarnished possum. But I think if somebody sees that, they'll get a little bit of a chuckle and a smile on there. And if somebody else doesn't look closely, they'll just see that it's some kind of text writing on there. So, and I managed to pull it off on both sides pretty well. I actually think this side looks a little better, but just kind of a nod to Eddie Van Halen, who, like so many people, I started playing guitar entirely because of him, and I played for many years. My arthritis doesn't let me really play anymore, but I was sad to see him pass away. So just kind of a little shout out to him from, this would be 13-year-old John. Now, just to briefly talk about the process a little bit, I'm holding off painting like this pack on the side, the bed rolls, any of the stowage and the shell casings and things like that. I'm holding off painting those until I get further along in the weathering process, because in the weathering, when I'm doing streaking and mud effects and things like that, it's not that mud and weathering won't get on these, but they're gonna, in my mind, they're gonna weather slightly differently because of the type of material they are. It's cloth material, things like that. And then, like, say, the shovel, that's going to have a weathering all of its own, where if you've ever used a shovel a lot, you know that okay, if the shovel itself is painted a certain color, then there's going to be a certain amount that gets worn off, and then it's going to be down to just bare bright silver where, you know, you stick it in the ground, it cleans anything off. If you wash the shovel off, you're left with some, you know, fairly bright metallics. So I'm not going to do any additional painting right now because I need to start on the weathering, but that's why I'll get further into the weathering and then paint the stowage and then go back and weather the stowage separately. Now somehow I painted this gun deck, I think it was in the previous episode, and I guess because I got so focused on this doggone barrel here that I completely forgot to paint the box over here. So I'm going to start off with some Vallejo Panzer Aces Old Wood. Now I'm not using this because it's named wood and I'm wanting to make that look wooden, but I'm really just wanting kind of a warm brownish, light brownish color. Anything that's warm and lightish brown should work just fine. Maybe a little bit of gray in it to desaturate it, but I just like this color, so this will be the base that I'll paint. The paint thinned with water, and I'm just going to put it on. Probably should have grabbed a bigger brush, but oh well, I'll work with it. But I'm just going to put it on in 2 or 3 thin coats. We'll see how much it takes to get it covered, and then I'll move on from there. Now I'm going to take some Vallejo Buff and just paint in some varied lines and stipple in some texture and things like that, just kind of simulating wood grain. All right, I'm going to use a couple of contrast paints, Snakebite Leather and Nasdrag Yellow. I mixed them together in equal parts, and then I put in, we'll call it 2 parts of the contrast medium for the paint. So 1 part Nasdrag Yellow, 1 part Snakebite Leather, 4 parts contrast medium, and I'm just going to glaze this over the wood to just give it a little bit of a different look. I like this color. I've been experimenting with these colors. I like this for wood that's aged and kind of, you know, this is a foot locker that, you know, would be handed out, just kind of, you know, cheap, maybe pine or something like that, whatever kind of space wood is on the Cadian planet. But I'll go ahead and paint that in, and I'll probably do 2 coats. Sorry if that's out of focus. I'll do 2 coats just to get a little darker, but I may just go with 1. It'll depend on how it looks when it dries. I painted the metal parts with lead belcher off camera, and now I'm going to paint this little eagle design with Screaming Skull. I'm going to put in some Agrax Earthshade, and this will bring out the details, and it'll also deepen the shadows and all of those things that it brings to the table. Alright, there you can see how that's turned out. Hopefully it looks like a wooden box. I think the Agrax Earthshade did a nice job of bringing out the shapes and things like that. On that hinge there, right beneath the eagle, I completely painted over that with Agrax Earthshade, and then went back in and brightened that up with some lead belcher right on the top of those hinges, just to make it easy. But yeah, that'll do. It doesn't work up here, but it works here, so I'm happy with that. All right, and there's the gun deck dry fitted onto into the hull, just to see how this is coming along. And I like how it's looking so far. I'm okay with it. Still a lot to do. I think I'm about ready to get into the chipping and then the other weathering and things like that. That'll do it for this episode. This is a Patreon exclusive video, so thank you for being a patron. It's really a blessing to me and my family, and I just couldn't do this without what you guys do for us. So thank you very much. And I'll just do as I always do and leave you with that final thought, that in this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're not having fun. That too. But if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.